Welcome to the lecture for Basics of Biblical Hebrew, Chapter 27, the appeal stem, but this time with weak verbs. Now, frequently my students will tease me because I'll say, don't worry, the material in this chapter is easy, no problem, quick to get through. And I kind of get this reputation for saying too many things are easy. Well, I've avoided that with these lectures until now. I can't go any further without telling you that the information in this chapter is really easy. In fact, most of the weak verbs in the appeal stem maintain the strong verb diagnostics. There's only one weak verb class that doesn't, and you already know all the rules that govern the changes you'll see. So in this chapter, you're taking stuff you already know and applying it just to a couple new instances to master the appeal stem with weak verbs. So let's begin by looking at the third chet ayin category of weak verb on your screen. You'll see here that these verbs have chet or ayin as the third root letter. Our example from shalach has chet in the third root position. And all of the strong verb diagnostics are maintained in each of the 6 conjugations. That is, hirik dagesh forte in the perfect, shawah pathic dagesh forte in the imperfect, pathic dagesh forte in the imperative, the infinitive construct, the infinitive absolute, and shawah pathic forte in the participle with the big giant mem prefix of the participle stem. The only thing that's slightly different here is that you've got the A-class stem vowel or the furtive pathic in these forms because of the guttural in third root position. But you've already seen that a million times, so there's no need to even worry about these forms because all of the strong verb diagnostics are present in the third chet ayin weak verb category. So let's move then to the third aleph category of weak verbs. Third aleph category, let's look at our screens for these diagnostic features. Here you will see and find more good news. And it's this: all of the strong verb diagnostics that you learned in the last chapter appear in each of the weak verb forms that you see in the third aleph weak verb category. Meaning this: when it comes to the appeal stem, third aleph verbs really aren't weak because they follow the strong verb diagnostic patterns. So once you know the strong verb diagnostics from the previous chapter, there's nothing new to learn for the third aleph category. So we can just move on, simply seeing that something that you see normally changes doesn't change in the stable environment of the PL stem. Let's move then to the third hey category. Now, normally you're taught to expect that this particular weak verb class is tricky. It's tricky, but not here. The PL stem diagnostics are so stable that they even maintain themselves in the third hey category. Let's look at our screens together. You'll see in the perfect, the imperfect, the imperative, infinitive construct, infinitive absolute, and participle, all of the strong verb diagnostics are present. But I want to point out on this screen that in addition to the regular strong verb diagnostics, you're also going to see highlighted in gray those features unique to the third hey weak verb category. That is, those distinctive endings that are diagnostic of the third hey verbs. If you'll see on your screen in the next slide, you'll see a summary of those endings. Now, you've seen this summary in the kal stem and in the nifal stem, but it bears repeating here because the weak verbs in the third hey class are so common. Now, the good news is all of the strong verb diagnostics for this particular weak verb are maintained. You simply have to combine what you know about the PL strong verb and identify the endings as third hey to properly reconstruct the verbal root. But other than that, there's nothing new here. Everything you've seen before appears here. There's nothing new. Let's look at geminate verbs. Geminate verbs, you'll remember, are those verbs that have identical second and third root letters. Well, in the PL stem, they're strong. Let's look at our screen. You can see here that in each of the forms, all of the strong verb diagnostics are maintained. Every form has a dagesh forte in the second root letter. In the perfect, there's the hirik under the first root letter. In the imperfect, you have shawah pathic forte. And throughout the different diagnostic features, you can see all of the strong verb diagnostics. So, for the geminate verbs, there is no weakness to encounter. In fact, like some of the other weak verbs, they're considered strong in the PL stem because they don't exhibit any weaknesses. Now we come to the category of weak verb in the PL stem that does exhibit substantial change, and these are the weak verbs that we need to concentrate on for this particular chapter. Look at your screens with me. We're going to talk here about the 2 guttural verbs in the PL stem. 2 guttural verbs. Now you know that those are verbs with a guttural in the second root position. Now combine that with the knowledge that all PL verbs love to double the second root letter or to place a doggish forte in it. But you can't place a doggish forte in a guttural consonant. So that's where the change is going to come. The guttural and second root position is going to reject the doggish forte, and you're going to get one of two responses in the spelling of the verb form. You're going to get either compensatory lengthening or virtual doubling. Compensatory lengthening or virtual doubling. Let's look at our screen again. A guttural consonant or resh in the second root position will reject the doggish forte of the PL stem, and this will result in either virtual doubling or compensatory lengthening. Now we begin our first example with the normal strong verb in the PL stem, the PL perfect 3ms katteo. Here you have the heroic under the first root letter and the doggish forte, diagnostic of the PL stem, in the second root letter. But now let's look at our second example, ba'er. Here you have a two guttural verb with a virtual doubling. In this particular instance, the heroic is retained, but there's no doggish forte. And we call that virtual doubling, which is really virtually no doubling, meaning this. The guttural in the second root position, in this case ion, rejects the doggish forte, as all gutturals do. Now, when that guttural is rejected, it doesn't lengthen the heroic to sere, and so we call that virtual doubling, or you can think of it as virtually no doubling. So you've lost, in essence, 50% of your diagnostics. You're only left with the heroic under the first root letter. You're only left with the heroic under the first root letter. The doggish forte is gone, and it's gone because it couldn't appear in the guttural. In the third example on the page, from the verbal root mem, aleph, nun, may, ain, you see a two guttural verb with compensatory lengthening. Here you see that the guttural in the second root position, in this case aleph, has rejected the doggish forte, and the heroic that you normally see under the first root letter has compensated for the loss of that doggish forte by lengthening to sere. Heroic lengthening to sere. Now you've encountered both virtual doubling and compensatory lengthening way back in the nouns. So this is something you've already seen. You're applying something you already know to a new environment. Now this is the only type of change that you're going to see that affects at any measure the spelling of the PL weak verb. This rejection of the doggish forte by the guttural in the second root position. Now you've already seen that kind of rejection and the lengthening, either virtual or compensatory. So you're taking something we already know and applying it here, and so there shouldn't be too much difficulty in identifying the form. Let's look at these forms together. In the first category on your screen, you're going to see two guttural verbs, and we're going to begin with virtual doubling or virtually no doubling. That is, in the six forms that you see on your screen here, you're going to see only 50% of the diagnostic features or 66% of the diagnostic features that you're used to seeing. We'll begin with the perfect. Here you see the heroic under the first root letter, but the het in the second root position rejects the doggish forte, but there's no lengthening of the heroic, so it's virtual doubling. In the imperfect, you have only schwa, pathic, no forte. And if we move all the way to the participle, you'll see that again, schwa, pathic, no forte. So in the imperfect and the participle, you've really lost only 33% of the diagnostic features, one of the three. The remaining two diagnostic features, the schwa and the pathic, should be enough for you to identify these forms as PL. In the imperative, the infinitive construct, and the infinitive absolute, you've lost 50% of the diagnostic features. The doggish forte that you would normally expect in the second root letter has been rejected, but no lengthening. And so these particular forms only maintain the pathic under the first root letter. That pathic under the first root letter is going to be the one feature that identifies these forms as PL two guttural verbs. Let's look at two guttural verbs with compensatory lengthening. In the perfect, you'll see that the heroic has lengthened to sere. That is, you begin with heroic. You want to see a doggish forte in the resh. The resh rejects the doggish forte. Now you'll see on your screen that that heroic is lengthened to sere. The red sere under the bait of berech represents the heroic plus the rejected doggish forte. Okay? Now in the imperfect, the imperative, the infinitive construct, the infinitive absolute, and the participle, all of the remaining five forms, the pathic that you normally see under the first root letter has lengthened from the short A, pathic, to now the long A, comets. The reason for the lengthening in every case is the rejection of the doggish forte by the resh that is diagnostic of the PL stem. So the doggish forte is still there in these forms. It just doesn't appear as a doggish forte, it appears as a comet. So the peel weak verb in the one guttural category with virtual doubling and compensatory lengthening is the only category of the weak verb in the peel weak that will give you any trouble with identification. All of the other weak verbs maintain the strong verb diagnostics. They all maintain the strong verb diagnostics. So as we move to our final chart for this chapter, look at your screens with me. Look at your screens. You will see the summary of peel diagnostics for both strong and weak verbs. Now here's the good news. You begin at the top with your strong verb. You've memorized those like a robot from the last chapter, and you know exactly what makes a peel verb a peel verb. It's that doggish forte in the second root letter. In the perfect, it's the hurricane of the first root letter. In the other ones, it's the schwa, the pathic, and the forte combination, or simply the pathic forte combination. The diagnostic features are crystal clear in your mind. Those diagnostic features also occur in the third chet ayin category, the third olive category, the third hay category, the geminate category as well. The only two categories that you need to concern yourself with on this screen are the bottom two. There are two guttural categories, the two guttural with nun, chet, mem, and the two guttural with beit, resh, kaf. In the first two guttural category, you see that you have the weak verb with virtual doubling, and in the second guttural category, you see that you have the weak verb with compensatory lengthening. All of the other forms in the entire chart maintain all of the strong verb diagnostics, so there's nothing new to memorize there. You could, in fact, if you wish, simply delete all of the forms that exist between the strong and the two guttural categories and live with the three categories, the strong, two guttural number 1 and two guttural number 2. If you know those three basic lines, you know all you need to know to master both the peel strong verb and all of the peel weak verbs. And here's something to note. The peel stem is the third most common stem in the Hebrew Bible. Kal is the most common, hifil is the second common, and peel is the third most common. Now, what's great about the peel is that it's super stable in its construction. So the only time you need to concern yourself with any weak verb diagnostics is two guttural. Like I said, this chapter is super easy, and that's all there is.